We're going to start. Here we go. This is today is April 2nd, 2012. This is the 39th annual Square Dance Callers Convention for the CALLERLAB. Welcome now to Nashville, Tennessee. This session is how to use music. And we are going to take a broad topic and we're going to narrow it down to a rifle scope and be very precise on how we address the topic of music. And specifically, how do callers apply themselves to music and how we as callers bring this musical talent to the dancers. Understanding that music is just one of many tools that we have in our tool bag. We use choreography, and within choreography you have subsets such as difficulty, a degree of difficulty, sight calling. And within music, this is an often overlooked topic, and we're very happy that CALLERLAB is bringing music as a topic again to the CALLERLAB convention. Joining on the panel today, it's not only my honor to introduce somebody for whom I've had an utmost amount of respect. I remember as a young caller looking up to this man, and it's an honor to have him on our panel for all of us. This is Jim Mayo. My name is Buddy Weaver, and I'm going to ask Jim to start out, and then we'll probably kind of do a little back and forth between Jim and I. And we will take time every now and then for questions if you have any questions. If you do have questions, you will please raise your hand, and we will get a wireless microphone to you, remembering that all questions, all comments must be recorded. Without any further ado, Mr. Jim Mayo.
Thank you. A little more of the volume, if you would. That's so I don't have to yell, shout, and scream. Those of you who know me and have had occasion to communicate with me know that I have a bit of a hang-up about the current state of square dancing. I hear all the complaints and things that have gone wrong and all the reasons for our problems. It's my personal belief that a major share of our difficulty arises from the fact that we have limited, spoiled, minimized the dancing part of square dancing. We have concentrated so much on the geometry and the choreography and the excitement of the puzzle, all of which are valuable. I'm not putting them down. But the price we have paid is that we have, to an unfortunate extent, minimized the role that music plays, and that the experience of fitting our movement to the music plays in the overall dancing experience. Every other form of dancing has an absolute connection between the action of the dance and the music or rhythm, and rhythm is music, even if it's only a drum beat. That's music. And the matching of the movements to that drum beat takes place to a much greater extent in every other form of dance than it does in square dancing. That's not always been true. There were some early days, particularly in traditional, when we had live orchestras and real music, we used to sometimes let the callers shut up and the people move, in fact, to the music. That's a rare occurrence these days. And one of the pet peeves that I have is this little button here. It's fun sometimes at a caller school. I go over and I pull out the plug so it doesn't do anything anymore. But that doesn't stop the thumb going. You know, the plug is out, there's nothing happening, but the guy's going up and down with this. It's part of you give the call, you give the call. That's one of the most annoying things that I can experience on a dance floor. It just takes the music away so that I can be heard. Well, if the choreography is that important, then the dance has suffered. And so I have a little hang-up on that problem in our activity. We don't pay much attention to the music anymore. There were in the earliest days callers who recorded singing calls who really thought that they had done the perfect job, and many of them did a very good job. and they got offended if you changed their figure. These days, we hardly even bother to learn the figure, and a lot of them aren't worth learning. But it still is true that a dance experience where you fit the movement of the people to the beat and melody of the song, and the caller participates by sharing that music and rhythm, is a really wonderful experience. We don't have much of it these days. I go to conventions and I sit on the sidelines and watch, and I'm almost embarrassed. There are exceptions, wonderful callers who do it right and make the music experience and the dancing experience flow and reconnect to the music. It's a wonderful thing to do. I have, as I say, this prejudice. Maybe you don't share it, but that's my opening position, and that's one of the important reasons for having a session like this that lets us reconnect to the value of the music.
I wholeheartedly agree with that position. In fact, if you don't mind, I'd like to expand on it, because in many cases as a record producer, and even before I became a producer, we often heard comments from callers who say that, well, my objection to using square dance music is so many times it doesn't sound like the original song. And I would say, well, what do you mean it doesn't really sound like the original song? And I can remember one individual who will go nameless, but who went on to produce his own music, and he produced it so that he felt it would sound like the original song. And musically, it didn't sound that different from everybody else's. And as soon as the caller came to the point where he had to actually stay in time with the tune, he would go to a hash type of presentation. Now, for example, to point out what we're talking about here and giving the dancers a dance experience, it comes down to a whole series of word meter. And word meter is, for example, if we're using something like a singing call, is being able to actually phrase our words just like the original song. So if the song were something as simple as, well, for example, if I were to just say, give you a square dance call, and I'm going to, let's say it, walk around your corner, girl, and seesaw, join hands, circle left around the hall, and now the boys star right hand, turn it around, do a left Allen man, and weave the ring. What tune am I singing? I heard you. Say it a little bit louder. Happy birthday. That's the word meter. And that's how we bring that dancer back to the measure of music. However, if the tune is playing happy birthday and the caller says, walk around the corner, girl, and seesaw around your partner, and boy star right, blah, 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 blah. Well, you're just hashing it. You've lost not only the feeling of the music, but you've robbed the dancers of the experience of dancing to the phrase of the music. So the musicians who've worked hard to put together a musical phrase strung for you are now deprived of it. And I think you've got a good example. Here's a great example. Go ahead. Jim, why don't you elaborate on this?
This is Bruce Johnson calling many years ago, and it came out very early on. And it's one of the best examples I know of a singing call in which the delivery of the commands matched the metering and phrasing of the original song. And the song is Me and My Shadow. Yeah.
Here we go. Left Valley man and a grand old right and left around the town. When you meet your partner, catch all eight for the right-hand half. Back for the left, a full turn to the corner, catch all eight for the right-hand half, and back for the left again. Four ladies star across, men turn 'em left, your corner swing, and then promenade round the center with me and my shadow strolling down the avenue.
Listen to the figure.
Get couples cross, trail through, U-turn back, star through, circle half and then pass through, star through, cross, trail through, U-turn back, star through, circle four, go halfway around the floor, dive through and substitute, star through again, cross, trail a swing, and promenade home with me and my shadow strolling down the avenue.
Now, by contrast, how many times will you hear somebody put the same needle on? Hang on, I'm not used to putting a needle on a record. Dang it. I'm out of practice.
Amazing how you lose that skill.
Walk around that corner, girl, now. Seesaw around your bow. Hey, join hand and you make your ring and circle to the left. Go around and now the boys star right in the middle of the ring. Go once around and do one on the man left your corner. Left on the man and here we go with the right and left. It doesn't sound anything like the song. You could.
Yeah, but you have a hard time staying away from the meter.
That's true. I have to work very hard when I hear that to not want to sing it on meter. But how many times do we as callers hear that? How many times do we as callers do that? And you're not singing it. If that's your version of singing, you're doing a patter call. And if you've done a patter call before it, you've just done 2 patter calls. Congratulations. However, there's a difference between patter and singing call. That's why we have the difference. And that's the difference, is following the word meter of the song. It gives you the dancers not only the idea that they actually know what the song is, but it gives them, as Jim says, the phrasing that the dancers want.
It is just the original song, and it's hard to do, but that's not something, you don't produce that while you're making up the singing call figure as you go along. Right. You got to use the one that came with it, the one that he put a lot of work into to design it so that the timing and the phrasing with the original song worked. Very often these days, the callers don't have any idea at all what the original figure was, and very often it's not worth worrying about. But there are still examples of some very good matches to the song and the metering. Another one that does it is Somewhere Over the Rainbow that Jerry Haig did. Another good example. It has a little problem in it. His original figure is a very nice figure, but he sets up an ocean wave with the girls on the end, and then he wants the girls to run around the boys and all 8 circulate. And that won't happen. Today, girls don't run around boys into the center. That doesn't happen. So you have to either walk through the figure. And I use it regularly, and I do walk through that. I set it up as 30 years ago, we did that routinely when we had a singing call figure, because dancers couldn't respond the way we now expect dancers to. But you set it up, said, when you get to this situation, girls, why don't you try it? You'd run around the boys, and that's going to happen in this dance. Now, let's go home and dance the dance. As if you do that, you can get them through and use the original figure and use the original metering of the figure to match the song. And that's the bottom line point today is it's very hard to provide that experience all the time. But once in a while, maybe, please, just let me dance to a great song where the figure has been fitted to the music, and we can make the timing so that you don't have to stop, go, which is routine for our patter dancing these days. It's a really great experience to square dance with the music.
In defense of the recording industry, I'm proud of the people who come and do vocals for me and my label. And there are. And the one criteria that everybody who's recorded for me knows is you sound, if you keep your word meter in time with the original song, you must sound like the original song. If you start hashing it, and you send me that vocal, I'm going to turn around and send it right back to you and say, do it again, but this time sing it rather than give me a recorded hash call. Because it's important not only for the folks who are out there, because we've learned that many callers will listen to the call side. Contrary to popular belief, many callers do listen to the vocal side of a record or a CD release or an MP3, and they learn how to do that song from the vocal side. Thus, at the vocal side, if it's wrong or if it's off meter, the caller will thus learn the same thing. One of the things that we, Jim and I have discussed too on this is introduction here to musical variety, and that here is key. We've established musical meter, but now we take that to next logical step, and that's variety. We can talk about rhythms. Rhythms come down to basically a boom chuck, shuffle rhythms, or 6/8. Those are the three predominant rhythms that we find in square dancing. And I think if you went back 100 years ago, you'd find that the predominant rhythm in square dancing was 6/8. Most of the live bands played 6/8s, a lot of reels, a lot of jigs. And that's why there was more dance in the square dance movement at that time, 100 years ago. As I'm so hesitant to use the word evolution, but as things have changed over the years, and we've kind of gotten away, we've gone towards less phrasing in our music. We've gone towards 2/4 boom chuck, which is very predominant. I would say from the late 40s, early 50s. Then in the mid 50s, we got away from phrasing completely, and the old saying was we had what we call the all-forgiving hoedown. And the all-forgiving hoedown, for example, is just nothing more than playing a bunch of chords, and you don't really get a sense of where the musical phrasing is at all. It's just chords. This is a great piece of music. This is one of the few records that I actually keep on my computer. But unless you're really familiar with the tune, you're not going to really know where the tune starts and where the tune ends. And this is what callers listened to for so many years, and what drove us off the musical phrase. And when we went off the musical phrase, our dancers followed us right off the musical phrase. When we could no longer find the beginning of a musical phrase, the dancers will do it. Now, contrary to what some people believe, I'm here to tell you that every single dancer can follow a musical phrase. They learn it when they're children. They learn it when they learn B-I-N-G-O, B-I, and they would clap along. And if one kid fell out, he knew, or she knew, little Jimmy or little Johnny knew he fell off and fell right back into the phrase. Phrasing for dancers is built in, it's hardwired. If dancers are off the phrase, it is not because of them. It's because you drove them off the phrase. How many of you are round dancers? I know some of you. There you go. A vast majority of you are. How many of you have danced something like as simple as Frenchy Brown and the cuer was off? He was behind. Does that feel natural? Does it feel normal? No, it feels wrong. It's the same thing in square dancing when we as callers don't follow musical phrase. When we hit a grand square in the middle of a musical phrase. So now the dancers are completely off. It's like doing your round dance when you're completely out of sync. It all comes together that way. If you can understand that, then you're on the road to becoming a more successful square dance caller. If you dismiss that, then you're in the wrong session. And I invite you to maybe go and join another session right now, because it is so vitally, goodbye Mike, it is so vitally important to find that musical phrase. And if you're not hitting it, if you're not letting your dancers hit it, then that's the problem. Go ahead.
It's certainly true that with the choreography that we're offering to dancers these days, you're not going to let the dancers have beat number one on the phrase every single time. That was true in the earliest days of traditional square dancing, when everything was 8 beats or 4 beats. Then you could let the dancers have beat number one. Very early in our modernization of square dancing, it became clear the call square through. 1957. It's 10 beats. It's not going to fit a phrase because the phrase is 8. And so we're already off the phrase. But my argument with this has for a long time been that the way many callers call, the dancers will never get beat one because we take it for ourselves. And the reason we take it for ourselves is it feels good. It would also feel good if we let the dancers have it now and again. And one of the ways to be sure that they get it, at least occasionally, is to give it to them when you start. If you let them have the first beat one, they'll have beat one more often throughout the tip, throughout that routine, than if you take it for yourself. And the reason we take it for ourselves is it feels good. Don, you want to add a comment?
On the mic, please. On the microphone, please. That one's dead. You mind sharing? You two know each other? Okay.
Don Beck, Massachusetts. I was trying to save this till the end, but it's so pertinent for what you're talking here. When we talk about phrasing and letting dancers have beat one every once in a while, it'd be kind of nice. You're talking here, the way you were beginning, that sample record you played, it was letting the caller have beat one and letting the dancers come in 2 or 3 later. That's a perfect example of not letting the dancers have beat one. And that was kind of a conflict of which are you trying to tell us, the callers or the dancers? You were talking for the caller there, you're talking for the dancer now. Yeah, you put that record on again and you can listen. He's singing the song. But
let me try to tell you my compromise. I would like the dancers to have the strongest possible connection to the music. And obviously we have to sacrifice in modern choreography because it's never going to exactly fit. If I am able to offer them that nice a connection to the metering of the song, I'm willing to sacrifice beat one. Because that connection to the song for me overrides even the importance that I feel beat one has. Now, it's also interesting that last year or the year before, Clark Baker put together a session where he gathered a group of us together to try to find out whether beat one was really all that important. And we sat around for one whole session with examples that he had on video and timing examples here, there, and everywhere, and even I had to admit that beat one, while it's important, is nowhere near as important as good timing. And the experience of moving continuously without stop-go through a dance is more important by far than beat one. But it's also very rare in today's square dancing. Unfortunately, a huge number of callers do not know when they give a call where the dancers will be when they finish that call, and therefore cannot give the next call unless they wait to see where the dancers are. And that produces what is painfully common in modern square dancing, the stop-go that is routine. It's too bad. But I'm willing to sacrifice beat one if I can give them the kind of musical experience that Bruce showed in that recording.
Did you have another comment?
just to follow through on that.
Okay.
I'm very glad to hear you're saying that. I've always said, yeah, because it is a balance, and as long as we're acknowledging it, sometimes feels good to dance on it. Sometimes feels good just to hear the song sung properly, even if there's some of the words are square dance calls. And yeah, and
that's right.
And it's, I mean, I've always said that when you're doing a singing call, you should find out what the singing call's emotions are and sing the song while calling, rather than just being musical and following it. But if it's a love song or a hate song, you ought to find out about that beforehand and sing the song so people will enjoy the music.
But you can have both.
Yeah. You can have both, and I do believe that you can have both, and I don't think you should sing a hate song either. But you know, the idea on word meter is perfectly portrayed in a singing call, and I do believe you can find perfect word meter without sacrificing beat one. It's difficult, and I'm going to tell you that most vocals on singing call records do not give the dancers beat one, and there's a simple reason for it. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound good. Then there's a difference between sounding good and feeling good. When you're out there performing, you're going to perform in a much different version than perhaps you would go into the studio. And Don, you've spent time in the studio too. I know you've got some records out there in 4-bar B. And we're both familiar with the idea that we might pre-cue something like a head square through. So the dancers are stepping on beat number one, but we know that when we go and cut that record, we can't necessarily pre-cue it. And Jim, you've been the same. You've done many records too. That because we need to sound like the original song, we steal that first beat for ourselves. Yes, that is a pitfall of the recording industry. Aside from that pitfall and understanding that, accepting it, and moving on from it, I would suggest that you can find a compromise. You pre-cue it many times. For example, side, space, grand, square. Now that's your pre-cue. Dancers have beat number one, and they're just jumping right along to this. I'm going to reset it because I want to call it as if I were calling the figure portion of it. We all know how to do a side space, grand square, circle left. That's your pre-cue. Does everybody understand what pre-cuing is? You do it sometimes without even realizing it. So, grand square, circle left, all those are pre-cues. Can you pre-cue a figure? Yes. Here's my figure. So on with the show, this is it. Head square through to 4 and round, there you go. Do, sa, do, one time you know. You gotta touch a quarter, walk and dodge, then partner trade. Here's a right and left through for me. Flutter, wheel around, then slide through. Swing your corner, girl, promenade or two. And oh, what heights we'll hit. And that's the whole song. Now, I found that word meter, and but I've trained myself to be able to pre-cue it just so it could I'm just like about a half a beat early. Not the full beat early, but the half beat. The dancers are starting on beat number 1. And I don't know if you heard that, but if you haven't, buy the MP3 of this session and listen to it over and over again until you can hear that difference. But you come in just a hair early. It gives the dancers beat number 1, and then you're back on musical phrase. I want to say one more thing about musical phrase, because we already established many of you are round dance people. How many of you callers are using alternative music, the quote alternative music genre? It is a nice little genre. Friends, it's like round dancing in square dancing. That's really what, in my opinion, what it feels like. Because it gives you a certain emotion. But at the same time, as we already established, if you're dancing around, like, for example, Frenchie Brown, and the cuer is off, you're off the phrase. If he's behind a beat, if he's behind 2 beats, and you're supposed to be doing a full box, but you're still finishing up the 2 forward 2 steps because you had to kill 4 beats somewhere along the line. It's the same thing when you're doing anything with alternative music. And I want to point this out to you here. This is one of the pieces that I happen to like. Pay no attention to the tempo. It's running just a little fast right now. I'm just using this for demo purposes right now. That's the start of the phrase. If I were cueing it, it would be 2 forward 2 steps right there. When she starts, picture perfect memories, that's the start of your song. If I'm calling this my way, I'd walk around the corner, girl, seesaw around your own, join hands, circle left around the ring, and the phrase starts. And she'll sing along. I don't want to come in anything later than this. It's the same thing if I were calling this poorly. I don't know if I can call it poorly. Hey, bow to your partner and bow to your corner. Side space, grand square, go 1, 2, 3, 4. It's off. It's off. It's just the same thing as a round dance cuer. Cueing it off. It's off. And every dancer feels it. Every dancer wanted to start moving when she started singing. Picture perfect memories. Every dancer wants to start moving. It's the same thing as if you hit this portion. Dancers respond to that. That's where the dancers want to start moving. Hang on, Chris. If I call a figure over that portion, I'm going to back it up just a bit. So let's say I want to be in the middle of the figure now. Heads go forward, up and come on back. Pass the ocean now and ping pong, circulate, and then extend. Well, the dancers really are doing it, but I've deprived them of something. I deprived them of that feeling of that musical phrase. Square through 3/4 round, corner, Alaman. Go right or left grand. Let the dancers move to the music. Let them move to the musical phrase. The dancers feel that forward motion, and we take it back from them because we want it for ourselves, or we don't know the difference, and we can't find it. Chris, you had a question? Please come forward and put your question on the microphone. You mind? You know Chris? Okay. We're only going to let the microphone go to people he knows.
Hi, Chris Pinkham from Hillsborough, New Hampshire. So why not, as recording artists, why can't you sacrifice the feel-good for a better prompted record in that you may be able to extend some influence out to callers that are not dealing with it that way. And number two, with alternative music, I'm finding with some of the choices that callers are making for alternative music, I can't find my feet. I can find my hands, but if I'm more dancing on my feet, it's just not there. So some of the choices for alternative music are downright pitiful as far as I'm concerned. But first question first, second question last, and if you're out of a battery, I'll go get you a new battery.
No, we just don't have a splitter to plug that in. That's. You have a splitter on you, Chris?
I do not.
Is it in your hotel room? Maybe you can go ahead and go get one first, please. Was that subtle? Was that subtle? Okay, bye, Scott. Let's see. The first. Yeah. First answer, the only answer that I can think of is why can't we as callers sacrifice that first beat? I can, but it's difficult. It's difficult. Would you?
I do it. As you say, I put out records that, like everybody, Dick Ledger put out records where he has the first beat for himself on the record, but that doesn't mean you have to call it that way. And I routinely, I have a hard time not giving beat one to dancers. I've made a lot of noise at caller sessions and schools about it, but I just would rather have the dancers have beat one whenever I can. And I'm happy to acknowledge that the session we did made it very clear that timing is more important. If I could trade beat one for good timing with every caller in a heartbeat, I would do it, no question. But when you don't give them beat one, you take that for yourself, and then your timing is bad too, there's not much left to dance, Square dancing really isn't dancing if we don't somehow connect it to the music. We can.
Another question? On the mic. On the mic, please, Mike. Do you know Mike? Jim, do you know Mike? Oh. All right. Step away from the speaker, please.
I was just going to say, my name is Mike Driscoll. I'm from Minnesota. I also record for Buddy. But a lot of times we have new callers coming in who have no sense of music, who have never sung, who have never worked with music. And I think we have to, first thing you should tell these type of callers, go see a voice coach. Work with music before you even start calling. First thing you should do is start working with the music. Have somebody who can work with you to get you, better qualified to do the music.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go. On the air.
Sorry about that. Okay. I want to hit a few more things on rhythm. You and I are on the same sheet of music on this. No pun intended. But we talk about boom chuck rhythm, and there's a lot to be said for boom chuck rhythm. It's the rhythm that made square dancing popular, and I don't care what anybody says about it. It's what made square dancing what it is today. If we didn't have boom chuck rhythm, we wouldn't have anything today. And I'm just going to give you a few working examples of what boom chuck rhythm is from a strictly patter call perspective or hoedown perspective. Okay, this is called Darren's hoedown. Darren, you're here, aren't you, Darren? Darren, you still awake, Darren? Every boom is where you step down, and every chuck is where your foot comes up. So boom chuck for every measure, which is 4 beats. You have 2 steps for every measure. Would you agree? Thank you very much. You can change some of the. Now that's what I consider more of a contemporary feel. There's not a live instrument playing on here on that particular song. There's a few live instruments playing there. Now, by contrast, you have the shuffle rhythms. The shuffle rhythms are really a march rhythm. That's really what they all come down to being. Alternative music, 99.9% of alternative music is shuffle rhythm. And so if the main thing that you have in your computer is shuffle rhythms, then you're marching your people all night long. That's what you're doing. Okay? And a couple of examples. Let's see, this is a good one. A little bit of a bunch up in there. Boom, boom, step, 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 step. Alternative music, just exactly the same piece we were using before. That, sorry, need you now? Sorry, that thing is too loud. I gotta re-EQ that thing. It's fast. Boom, 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 boom. Now, if a shuffle rhythm, he's slowing it down on the turntable. Yeah. If you can understand, a shuffle rhythm is, you have no boom chuck, no boom chuck. It's strictly boom, 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 boom. Now you get 4 steps for every measure. Bear in mind, for a boom chuck, you have 2 steps for every measure. For a shuffle rhythm, you have 4 steps for every measure. So therefore, you're asking the dancers to take twice as many steps. Can you then play hang on a second, Scott. Can you ask the dancers to dance it at the same tempo? No. Because if the dancers are dancing at a 128 beats per minute at boom chuck, they're taking 2 steps for every measure. If you played a shuffle rhythm, an alternative piece of music at 128 beats per minute, you're asking them to take twice as many steps in the same amount of time. And you will wear your dancers out. Or what inevitably happens, and is already happening if you haven't seen it, is dancers will take 1 step for every 2 beats of music. And now they don't dance. Here's what they do. The music is playing. Let's see if I can turn this down. Yeah. They do this. You just kind of walk around. Well, I got a long cord. I can come all around here if I want to. Hang on. That's a nice long cord, isn't it? So this is what the dancers do. Just take this one step for every 2 beats. How many of you folks see that? It's because inevitably that shuffle rhythm is played too fast, number 1. And number 2, they're tired of hearing it. They've been marching all night long to that same beat of music. You remember the song Summer Sounds? Shuffle rhythm. Why don't you play that every tip? See how they'd enjoy that. Yeah. Why don't we start with Summer Sounds before your hoedown, and then we'll chase it out of the singing call, and the next tip we'll use Summer Sounds as your hoedown again. You're giving them the same rhythm every single time. It's just more of a glaring in-your-face example of what we're talking about. Do you want to add something to that? Oh, a question. Sorry, Scott. On the mic, on the mic, Scott.
It's probably just dead.
Nice idea. That could be. We did.
Check. 1, 2.
Oh, yeah, you turn that up. Turn it up. They both have to be on.
That's what it was. Check.
Hang on.
Try turning it off.
No. Really? Oh. Is it on? No. You hear me. Here you go.
Are you on the same?
No, nothing?
I don't have anything on this. 1, 2.
Oh, there it is. Here you're on.
1, 2.
No, it's going in and out. Hang on.
Check. 1, 2. Aha, there we go. Scott Byers, Sacramento, California. My question is, now, understand that one of the things I studied in college was dance. Okay? So when I call, a lot of times I do a lot of alternative music. I don't have that people doing that. Now, maybe that my tempo is not as high as some people when I'm doing the alternative music. But I don't have people walking like this. I wouldn't use it if I saw people doing that. And I use a lot of alternative music. So my question to you is, I don't see what's wrong with people marching all night. I don't see what's wrong with 1 step for every beat of music all night.
I appreciate the question. Let me, yeah. It's not, and trust me when I say it's not meant as an attack on personal music choices. I like variety. I don't want to dance two-step all night long if I'm round dancing. My wife and I round dance a great deal, and I enjoy a slow two-step, and I enjoy a tango, and I enjoy cha-cha, and I really like rumbas. But if the Cure was only going to play for me a rumba all night long, I'd be kind of tired of the rumba after the hour. I like variety, and I believe that as a caller, I can bring that sense of variety to the dancers through a change of rhythms, through going through a shuffle rhythm, to a boom chuck. I even take one tip in a night where I call it my traditional tip, and we're going to put on the most traditional piece of boom chuck music I've got, and I've got tons of it, brother. I own it all, and then we'll chase it out of there with a very traditional singing call. Something that was done from the early days. That's kind of an homage to where we've come from, but it also gives the dancers a sense of variety. So the next tip we come up, and we're going to hit it with a nice alternative piece of music, and it might be "I Need You Now," and I might chase it out of there with a nice shuffle rhythm type of singing call. I advocate to give you the short answer to your question. I advocate variety more than anything else, and I think that's what we're trying to show here. Did you want to play that?
Yeah, but before I do, I don't have any problem with alternative music either. Ted Lazant does an absolutely outstanding job, but he pays very careful attention to which music, what tempo. He knows his music very well, so that he can bring in the grand square or the circle left exactly at the right place in the music. Many of the people who are using alternative music don't pay that much attention to it and don't do anywhere near as good a job with it. One of the other different subjects that I'm swapping away from alternative music, one of the distressing problems for me is callers who work with live music as if it was a record. Live musicians very often have a stronger phrase and beat than the records that we commonly use. And we, at the New England Convention, have, in the main hall on Saturday night, have traditionally had a live orchestra. Some of them very good, some of them not so good. Many of them have been very good, but we have some callers who have no experience whatsoever with live music, and they treat it as if it was a record, and they just wade through the phrases. This record has the kind of phrasing that you often get with live music. It's a rendo on rawhide, and it has a much stronger phrase that sort of cries out for make the dancing fit that if you can. And if you want to start in here and say head to couple square through, you sort of wasted the fact that this phrase is going to come along and go boom. And so if you can set it up so that when you get there you say head to couple square through, they get to start on the beat section, on the phrase. And sure, they're done with that, but when you get done, do a right or left through. Turn them, then you dive through, boom, boom, boom. You take advantage of the fact that there's a good solid beat.
That's really nice.
And
I like
phrase.
that. I've never heard that before.
It has a
Did you want that back?
It has a very strong phrase in it, and I changed the character of the choreography that I use so that I don't just wade through that phrase. I try to capitalize on the fact that I can give the dancers a connection to the music that's stronger than is typical in modern square dancing.
Very true. Now, here's a little question for you, too. I'm going to give you a lot of questions here. For example, how many of you folks have worked with the Ghost Riders band? Quite a few of you have. How many of you folks have worked with any live band, any live square dance band? Many of you have. You know, the Ghost Riders and most every good square dance band have one thing in common. It's the same lead instrument. Can anybody tell me what the lead instrument is for the Ghost Riders? Lead instrument. Piano? Nope. Guitar? Nope. Nope. Fiddle? Nope. No. You, the caller, is the lead instrument. in a live band? It's not a trick question, but a good band follows the vocalist. And what Jim was saying here, where you kind of muddle around behind the live band or treat a record like that kind of ties into finding that first beat, I think. And that's what made it for me, was because I worked with a live band very early on in my career, and I was fortunate to have read a lot of material about working with live bands, and that is that they will listen to you. If you hang back and wait, they'll hang back and wait. They're just going to play until you start singing. You know, I woke up when riding out one dark and windy day, and then you chase along. That's what a live band is supposed to do. If you treat your record as if they were a live band, using the same record, then you're able to lead. I'm going to lead this band. I don't know who the band is. They're pretty good. I like the music. I'm going to lead them. Dang it. Head square through, forehand around in the middle, you do. Swing through, spin the top, go right and left through, half sashay, go forward on your back away, box the net, go right and left on the man, here we go, right and left, grand around that land. I'm going to lead the band, and I want them to follow in behind me. I want them to fill in those blanks behind me. If you can do the same thing with your music, now all of a sudden you're giving that first beat to the dancers. Now you're getting the idea of pre-cueing. If you're new to the idea of giving dancers the first beat, I encourage you to learn how to call hash to this particular singing call that I happen to like. Make sure he doesn't steal it, right? I love this for hash. I love it for singing call. I love it for hash. What's the name of the tune? It's El Paso City. It's El Paso City. If you can learn how to call hash to this, you're going to accomplish a number of things. It's almost a 6/8. Thank you, Jim. Jim nailed it. It's almost a 6/8. And that drives dancers crazy. They love this rhythm. Because if 2/4 is step up, and 4/4 shuffle rhythm is step, march, 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 then the 6/8 is a skip. Yeah, they're skipping. They're skipping. The dancers just love it. They go crazy. That's number one. Number two, if you fall off the phrase on this and trying to call hash to this, it's just like somebody comes along and kicks you in the back. Every time you're off the phrase, boom, you're off the phrase, boom, you're off the phrase. Find your way onto it, and it's going to change the way that you call. If you've never called to strongly phrase music which sounds very close to 6/8, you'll change the way you call. Walk all around your corner, girl. Seesaw around your own, join hands, circle 8, circle up 8 around the ring. Allemande left your corner, girl, go right or left, grand, right and left. It's not an Allemande left, it's not Allemande left, it's not a left Allemande, it's an Allemande left. Correct? Say that on the microphone because that was articulate.
You need to deliver your command with the same rhythm that the record has, that the music has. And so you change the way you say Allemande left if it's to this kind of music rather than the Rendo kind of
Correct.
music.
Try to call ladies in men's sachet to that particular piece of music. If you can master that, you got one big step ahead. You have a question, Mike? On the mic, please. On the mic.
I was just, Mike Driscoll again. I was going to say that you have some 6/8 music, some hold-ons that you have put out.
Well, not really. Not. I think there's much better 6/8 and music that sounds very close to being a 6/8 that are very successful. And you have to kind of go fishing for it. And dancers don't often hear 6/8 or similar rhythm in hoedowns. That's just a reality. And a lot of callers use it for singing calls. They'll use El Paso City. They'll use Light the Candles Around the World. They'll use kind of pieces like that. What's the other one on Red Boot? 7 Spanish Angels. Okay, flat top. But there you go. They'll use those for singing calls, but you don't often get it for hoedown. Try it for hoedown. It's going to drive you, number one, as we said earlier, to the 6/8 or similar, which gives the dancers a nice boost. And number two, it's going to drive you to stay on phrase. And I guess number three, if you can get the idea of being the lead instrument for that orchestra, it's going to give you the idea of giving that first beat to the dancers. Jim.
Again, straying from the subject completely, when we were getting ready for this session, I looked around in all my notes and things to see if I had anything to say that might be useful. And I went back in my archives, and way back before there were any textbooks for callers, I wrote one. I was teaching caller schools in the 1960s, early 60s, and I wrote a textbook. And the first chapter in my textbook was music. It turns out it's 20 pages long. And I published 50 copies of it on a mimeograph machine. But the nice thing about the modern world is that the Square Dance Foundation of New England has a website. And on that website are all kinds of wonderful things. The gentleman sitting up here in the front, Bob Brundage, has conducted interviews with most of the people you ever heard about in square dancing, and 110 of those are available to either listen to or read on the website of the Square Dance Foundation of New England. Johnny Wedge is the guy who runs the content of that website. Patty Green makes the website for us, but it's a very valuable website, and that textbook that I wrote in 1966 with the first 20 pages about music and how to match the statements that you make with the phrasing of the music and a whole bunch of other useful things to know about music. That book is available to download and read on that website. It's free of charge. Go ahead and read it. And I went back and reread that 20 pages that I wrote about music. And it says about everything that I would want to say about music for square dance callers. And if any of you are curious to go through the technology once again, it's a readily available source, and I recommend it.
That's a great segue to talk about resources briefly, because not only do you have the books and the interviews available, they also have on the New England Square Dance Foundation, you have audio downloads of live dances from the 1960s, 1950s. Some of the great names in the business who are doing live dances, and I think that really captures it better than anything else. You can hear a guy on record, but when you hear a guy live, that is really what this guy is all about, and their personality will come through a lot times much better. Another great resource is the old Sets in Order albums, and I know there's still a lot of them floating around out there. I know you can buy them off of eBay, and I know there are many callers already have their Sets in Order albums and have already digitalized them. I don't know, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not giving you legal advice, but I don't know that there is a copyright restriction on having those available for anybody to listen to, because it is an educational tool. So if there's a lawyer in the house who would like to correct me on that, hearing no motion, we move forward onto the next topic.
Let me make a comment about it. The whole subject of sets in order and copyright is a work in progress at the moment. Bob Osgood's collection of materials has been transferred to the University of Denver, and there is underway a negotiation that quite likely will make available online in digital form the entire collection of Sets in Order magazine. It's not there yet, and there's still some copyright restrictions to overcome. But once that hurdle has been bridged, I think there's a high likelihood that we'll go on with the next step and try to get permission to make available digital form of those Sets in Order records. They are a marvelous set, and as he says, they really do give a real life example of a whole collection of wonderful callers who were active in the old days. Some of us still are.
also had a very good sense of phrasing and a very good sense of timing. In the remaining few minutes, and before I launch into something else, do we have any questions from the gallery? Chris, come on up here. No, I'm sorry, that's not Chris. Bill, I'm sorry. Bill Ackerman. I know you, Bill Ackerman. How are you?
And I'm from New England, so I know Jim.
You know
so
Jim. Jim will let you use the mic. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Very early in this session, you spoke of making the choreo of a singing call fit the phrase of the music, and seemed to suggest that people often don't pay enough attention to the figure that comes with the record. Now, I hear a lot of stuff, mostly grousing on the internet, about how bad the figures that come with the record are, and how you should not listen to them and work out your own issues. Wow. So could you address that?
Yeah, number one, they obviously weren't talking about my records. And number two, I think there are some fine examples of good choreography that phrases it. And I did a caller seminar recently, and one of the topics that came up was, how do I change singing figures in a singing call? And now I found that question to be, I don't know, regressive. I thought that was just something for me that was something I learned, so early on. But I'm beginning to understand that it is a very valid question in today's market, because so many times we don't, or the callers that are out there, perhaps our models are not on the proper word meter. And so I guess if you don't follow word meter, changing a singing call figure is as easy as picking up a timing chart and making anything fit, and then just blah, 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 just spit it out, so to speak, quite literally so, and let it all come out. However, that doesn't really sound good. I think changing a figure in a singing call is as similar as what you're talking about. It's like what we talked about earlier with Bruce Johnson. It's crafting it so that you hear the lyrics in your head. If you were to walk out of here and do one thing, it's write a singing call figure to Happy Birthday. You know the melody. If you can phrase it out, we'll walk around the corner, girl, seesaw. If you can hear that, then you have the ability to make it all fit. If you can't do that, then that's where you need to come back, take a large step backwards, and understand what we're talking about here, because that's what it really comes down to. If you cannot phrase yourself to that tune, and if you were to, how many of you are male? How many of you guys are male callers? I know we have one female caller here. Any other female callers here? Any other female callers here? Two female callers. You sound like a girl when you sing, but moving right along. For you guys, you should be able to turn to your wife, and when you're laying in bed tonight, turn to her and sing to her. Walk around your corner, girl, and seesaw. But ask her, in a very little sense, ask her if she can identify the tune that you're trying to sing. Don't laugh. It's a very good exercise. It's a good thing to laugh before you fall asleep at night, by the way. So you might want to try that anyway. But if you can communicate that, because let's face it, our partners are sometimes our best tool in helping us grow. If you can do that, that's one major step ahead towards being a musical phrase. If you can capture the tune and change the tune, if you can hear the tune in your head and make that fit into square dance calls, replace the lyric with the square dance call, now you've just written yourself a great square dance figure to a great piece of music, which is probably on one of my labels, and you'll be able to then go out, and nobody can fault you for having a bad figure. And you can't, then you can say, well, I took what I heard and I made it better.
What time are we supposed to be done? 1 o'clock?
Are we done at 1 or 1:15?
1:15. 2:15.
2:15.
Okay, one of those.
It's only noon according to my clock.
Just one observation. I started out as a traditional caller, and we didn't change anything. Then we magically, after over a decade, learned to make changes. And I don't know how many of you have had exciting experiences at caller school, but I went to a caller school. I drove 2,000 miles across the country to go to Ed Gilmore's caller school. And you can really hit it off on the first day of a caller school if you show respect for your elders and do what they tell you to do. And everybody starts off a caller school by you get up and call. And I thought, well, hey, I'll make a big hit with Ed Gilmore, so I used one of his singing calls for my first thing, and I changed the figure in it. Yeah, okay. You know what happened. And it did. And it took us 5 years to get back to a civil relationship. We ended up very good friends, but it took a while. At that point, I was fascinated with the ability to change a singing call figure. That's my telephone, and I'm going to...
Didn't you get the memo you're supposed to silence your phone before you walk in here?
And so I went through a period when I was absolutely impressed with my ability to change singing call figures, and I changed them all the time. In the last 20 years, I have regressed. And now when I'm calling a dance, I rarely change. I don't use the figure that came with the record necessarily. I have a set of 30 or 40 figures that I can fit to most any record. There are some, like Somewhere Over the Rainbow, that I wouldn't change on a bet. You know, it's as close to perfect as I think it can get. So I'm going to do it exactly that way. And there are many others that I do. But once I start a singing call with this figure, I'm going to use it 4 times. Because I think that we are overdriving choreography with today's dancers. And I think we desperately need the relaxation of a singing call in each tip. And let me get the mic back to her while you talk.
Okay.
I'll meet you halfway.
Question from the gallery.
Thanks. I'm Erin Byers. I belong to Scott. And one of the things, some of you know that Scott is trained vocalist in classic and pop styles. And there are certain singing calls that he does that very much focus on the vocals. For instance, Oklahoma, Some Enchanted Evening, some of those songs. And he has found that if he uses difficult choreography or he changes the figure for every time, the dancers aren't really paying that close of attention. They're listening to him sing. And he has to keep the figure simple or they get distracted and they really can't get through the figure. So when you're considering what kind of figure to use with your singing call, think about how that singing call is going to be presented and how the dancers are going to react to the music to help you decide what kind of figure to use.
I'd like to go along and add on to those 2 points, too, because a lot of times callers change figures because they're trying to add variety. That can backfire on you, as we've already talked about here. Some of the simplest ways you can add variety to a singing call figure. If you're doing a figure that's going to involve a swing through to a spin the top, get rid of the do-sa-do before you swing through. Not only will it add some variety, I never thought I'd be saying those words, but it actually helps the dancers move to the musical phrase better because the do-sa-do to a swing through really is counterintuitive because the dancers are just moving, especially for the man, they're moving in an odd direction. If you don't believe me, then record yourself saying do-sa-do, swing through, boys run, and then loop it and get out in a square and dance it over and over again and tell me if after a while your right leg doesn't feel shorter than your left leg and you say, I can't stand the do-sa-do to a swing through. Don, we'll get to you in a minute. I see you waving. Did you need to use the bathroom? I see you waving your hand. Hang on a second. I'm almost done with my point. Yeah, I thought you were waving your hand for a hall pass. The other 2 ways you can add variety to a singing call is head, sides, heads. Simple changing of the sequence. If you're doing heads twice and sides twice, it can be boring. It can be boring for the dancers. But if you do heads, sides, heads as your figure sequence, it changes it for them. And it really gives you a nice progression for the dancers. There is no repetition aside from the same kind of repetition they'd have with heads, sides. Or right-hand lady progressions in singing calls. Often overlooked. And right-hand lady progressions are very simple to get to. And what right-hand lady progressions in many cases will allow you to do is give the dancers a shorter promenade. If you're working with dancers who are perhaps more geriatrically advanced, where mobility may be an issue, and a shorter promenade is often beneficial. So right-hand lady progressions in many cases gives that to you so that the dancers don't have as far to walk and you can sing melodically as the people are coming back to home. Now, a question from Don Beck.
You have to give him the microphone so that he can do it on mic. But also one of the masters of singing call figures was Dick Jones. His whole presentation was the music and the delivery. The figure he kept simple enough so it didn't interfere with his delivery.
You know him, don't you?
Actually, now, since you spoke first, I have two comments. One thing, you just mentioned about giving variety of head, sides, heads. Let me caution people not to do head, sides, because that way there's an inactive and an active set of dancers. And if you do head, sides, the men get two of each. The women get the same one all the way through. But head, sides, heads gives the women the focus, all, two active, two inactive also. And some people miss that point. I just want to do an anecdote for something that Aaron said. I had a dancer come up to me once, good dancer, regular dancer, Jim, Bill Drury, and I was put on a singing call. Huh? Good dancer, good guy. I started to do a singing call, or maybe it was after it. He said, I can't dance to that music. And I said, why not? That recording is so beautiful, I can't concentrate on what you're saying. All I hear is the music. I thought, yeah, it was a very nice piece of music, too, but that was Bill.
And if you don't mind, I'm going to use it as a segue into one of my final notes on this. Since this is a music session, I'd be remiss in not saying something about this. How many of you are on computers? How many of you are using digital media? How many of you are using records still? Any records? We have about a 50-50. That's quite interesting. If you're on records, or excuse me, if you're on computers, how many of you have taken your old record collection and put it onto your computer? Bzzz, mistake. Bzzz, mistake. And I'm going to tell you why. Because if you've taken an old scratchy record and you put it onto a digital format like a computer, all you've done is recorded a scratchy old piece of music. Go out and get the digital copy from the producer because it sounds so much better than a scratchy old record. And if you can't do that, then go and buy a brand new copy of that record and then memorialize it onto your computer. And then you can put that away in a hermetically sealed jar on your front porch. And that way it's forever kept for you. But that way because there's nothing worse than when I listen to a caller. And this is my second comment and my final one on music. If you are using computers and you are using alternative music, as a dancer, I find it irritating to have a caller using an alternative piece of music for a hoedown and chase it out of there with a very old singing call, especially one that's taken off of a record, because it's not a contrast, it's a conflict. It's like going from playing a CD and saying, well, now we're going to take out our 78 RPM and plop it down and put that old scratchy 78 RPM on there. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound good by fidelity. It doesn't sound good by orchestration, because the orchestration, the quality we have in our studio today is nowhere near comparable to what we had in the studio 5 to 10 years ago. So if you're going to use an alternative piece of music for your hoedown, get a piece of music singing call-wise that's been done this century. The 21st century. Maybe, for us, considering we would call it the later 21st century, because for us, let's face it, this is the latest 21st century we're going to be in. But that's right, the last millennium. But you know what I'm saying. And if you don't, go home and put it on. If you're using alternative hoedowns and you're using old singing calls, go home and listen to it. Listen to it with an open mind and tell me that those two don't sound good, that they do not sound good with each other. And you have to find something that complements it. That's the whole point of music. And if you're going to use an old record, then use all your old records. I encourage use them all. Okay? Any final comments? Any questions from the gallery? A nice hand for Mr. Oh, hang on a second. Now, come on up. Question?
Yeah, Chris Pinkham from Hillsborough, New Hampshire again. I know that all of us are in a position where we may not be able to dance anymore because of physical issues, but if you're a caller and you're not dancing, your dance skills are rusting, and as a result, so too will your calling skills. If you get out there and you continue to dance, you keep a better perspective on how things should be on the floor. And that's one of the issues that I have with some alternative music. When I am on the floor, I'm having a major problem finding my feet. So pick your alternative music carefully, but if you can still go out and dance, my advice is to get out on the floor, because it's more of a learning experience than you think it might be.
I'm going to add one thing to that and say, if you are going to use alternative music, you should be a round dancer. You absolutely should be a round dancer because you will get the fine sense of hearing that music used in its proper form, which is danced to a musical phrase. So if you're going to use alternative music and you don't know how to round dance, you know what to fix. Learn how to round dance and stay in round dancing. And if you folks have kind of gotten jaded with square dancing, as many times partners do over the years, now is a great time to learn round dancing or start round dancing again. It keeps your skills honed. If you cannot keep up with the squares, at least keep up with the rounds. A nice hand for Jim Mayo. Thank you, sir. A pleasure. Thank you, friends. Enjoy the rest of your convention.